We are following breaking news this morning. Former President Donald Trump says that he received a target letter from the special counsel investigating the January 6th insurrection. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane is joining us now from Capitol Hill with more on this. So as per usual, the former president is the one outing himself when it comes to investigations. What are we learning, Scott?
Social, much as he did the last two times. He says he was charged in New York City before the local prosecution in Manhattan, and in Miami, in the federal prosecution in Miami over the classified records. The former president, in a Truth Social post just now, says that Sunday he received a target letter from special counsel Jack Smith, who is investigating the efforts to overturn the 2020 elections. A target letter indicates you're not just a component of an investigation or a subject of an investigation, but the epicenter of it, the target of a federal investigation. So often when somebody receives a target letter in a federal investigation, they are eventually charged with a federal crime. Former president put the news out himself, in the process trying to characterize it, accusing the target letter and the special counsel of being a Biden administration overreach, a political targeting of Donald Trump. He also criticized the fact that he got the target letter, he says, on a Sunday while he was at a political event. But the target letter is an indication that a federal prosecution charges are not just possible, but imminent, happening in the short term.
And Scott, we had talked about how vast this investigation has been, this historic investigation. What can we read into that, and what have we really learned about how it could lead us to where we are right now?
This has the potential to be so much different than the federal prosecution in Miami, which, by the way, has a court hearing today into those classified records and the alleged attempts to conceal those records from a federal investigation. In the January 6th case, the bandwidth, the broadness of this case is seemingly limitless. It includes not just who and what gave rise to the deadly attack here on the U.S. Capitol grounds January 6, 2021, but what became of all those fake electors, all those electors who try to become alternates and to change the verified election results of the swing states in 2020. Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia. Also alleged threats against election officials and election workers, some of which we heard about during those public hearings last year of the House Select January 6th committee. And what became of all that money? The gobs of money that were raised through those fake, baseless election fraud claims. There was a lot of money raised. Federal investigators have reportedly been looking into how it was used and where it was used. There's also more. I mean, there are all these other components we don't know about because the witness list seems to be so large. Yeah, there were some of those fake electors who were called to testify before this grand jury. Key members of the Trump inner circle, including his vice president, Mike Pence, called to speak to this grand jury. There seems to be a sense here that if and when criminal charges come from Jack Smith for the January 6th component of his investigation, there could be a very large-scale case filed.
Yeah, and Scott, not just that. I mean, members of his own family have testified, and we sort of speculated that as the list of witnesses got closer and closer to the president, that this was a possibility. We understand that some of those who testified were offered limited immunity. Can you explain what that is and what it signals about the potential scope of a possible indictment?
Though we can't confirm it in this singular case or singular investigation, it's quite common in the federal criminal system for key witnesses, sometimes even eventual co-defendants, to get some type of agreement with the prosecutions to give their testimony, give aid to the prosecution in return for leniency, the dropping of charges, or a plea agreement. In this case, there are this broad set of possible witnesses, and witnesses who spoke to the grand jury, one of whom could have been a cooperating witness, somebody for whom the special counsel offered a promise of leniency in return for help with the investigation. It's just a distinctive case. There's really no parallel to this one, not even in the other federal criminal case against Donald Trump, because there are so many components, so many moving parts, so many players in the effort to overturn the 2020 election, and in that one-of-a-kind historic attack on the U.S. Capitol.
Absolutely. And as we had mentioned, a large number of people have been charged in relation to this. How could that play into what we're seeing now?
Yeah, we've watched more than 1,000 people face charges and face court appearances in connection with the siege of the U.S. Capitol. And there's an expectation that hundreds more will face arrest eventually. And in some of these cases, in some of them, you hear the defendants attribute their actions that day to Donald Trump, saying they believe their commander-in-chief directed them to the Capitol and to fight that day. Any number of people who are victimized on January 6th, including some of the injured police officers who say, if you're going to charge the people who attacked that day, what do you make of Donald Trump? When or if you should charge Donald Trump, should you charge him in connection with January 6th, with inciting the attack? These questions will likely soon be answered. A target letter is often given in close proximity to a decision on criminal charges. But don't expect an announcement or Jack Smith to articulate this in front of a podium. More often, the Department of Justice, and in this case, the special counsel, speak their case through court filings, through submitting something to the federal court system. In this case, in this investigation, Anne Marie and Nancy, that case would most likely be filed here in Washington, D.C.
Scott McFarland, thank you very much.